This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Good morning, everyone. I am Paolo Sironi, your host of the Banker's Bookshelf. Every month, I invite authors and researchers of the most interesting publications which found a prominent space in the library of bankers and fintech entrepreneurs. And today, I have with me the author of a very interesting book. The title is Super Apps, Unlock the Power of Super Apps, which is written by Neha Mehta and discusses basically the deepest transformation of financial services on the platform economy. That means how you can reaggregate a lot of banking and non-banking services to give back to the consumers a much more enriched experience. Now, without much ado, let me introduce you to Neha Mehta and ask her if you can spell a little bit about her experience that led her to the creation and writing of this very interesting book. Neha, welcome to the Back of Bookshelf.
Thank you, Paolo. It's good to see you and do this recording with you. We have known each other for such a long time, but never really sat down to do this. So it's an
Social
honor.
media is a great community to share thinking, right? And to make new friends.
Absolutely. So very honored to be on your platform. You're right. It's a very interesting topic. And I was working on it during COVID as a passion project. A lot of people ask me, why did I think of becoming an author? And I want to be very honest. I never thought I'm going to be an author. I've always been in awe of you and the work you do, the kind of impact you have created, not only in the academic world, but also in the industry. So I've always been very respectful towards authors, but a dear friend of mine bounced this idea to me during COVID, and he decided to back out. So I kept going and then got the book deal with Penguin, and this is how the book came into manifestation and the reality that you see right now. But essentially, if I talk about my background as a lawyer working in financial services, and just the way, all of us decided to be part of the fintech space. So was working in the space where we could use technology for the greater good of people. So how could we use technology to help underbanked and unbanked people? And I think Super Apps really plugs into that space of reaching the last mile, because as we know, legacy institutions, banks don't really have the bandwidth to serve the last mile. It doesn't really serve the economic purpose. And with the advent of mobile technology, cheap mobile handsets, I think it's far more easier for people to now use financial services, like you said, and disrupting the way people interact with each other, not just with peer-to-peer payments, but also how regulators look at this new space when they're trying to regulate and give licenses.
So, Neha, I see you have been traveling a lot recently, especially for the promotion of the book, Great Success Story. I do travel a lot for work, and I tend to describe the world simplifying strongly into three macro areas. I'd say that a lot of technology that today is considered digital technology was born in the United States of America. The Chinese in particular became very competitive in terms of building technology. Europe is where a lot of regulation is born. There is an interest and an attention from the European Commission to regulate markets, to harmonize them, and also to protect the consumers. Not always easy to do that, but regulation is important. But the winners or the leaders of the fintech revolution, to me, are all living in Asia Pacific or Latin America, because there the business models are born. And super apps are a very interesting business model, because they try to engage and monetize on consumers and banking clients in very different ways. So let's first of all try to explain what is a super app.
Yeah, I like, Paolo, how you categorize all the jurisdictions and you were giving away who the winner is. But if I were to just describe super app, I would say it's an everything app. So basically, anything and everything that you can imagine doing in your daily routine is all plugged into one ecosystem. So sometimes we compare it to a Swiss knife. Sometimes we call it like an umbrella app, because it allows you to key in your information once, and anytime you're making a transaction, your details have been recorded, and it's a seamless, frictionless process. So when we say everything app in the Asian context, because you spelled it out very nicely that all the winners, all the leaders are in the Asian market. Essentially, you will see these apps coming from China, India, Singapore, or anywhere in Southeast Asia, but also in UAE. And when you look at these apps, they have a common feature, which is one ability that was pull factor, where consumers felt the need to go back again and again, whether it was payments or messaging. So to give you an example, there are about 630 million unbanked people in Southeast Asia. And if we talk about the fourth largest economy in the world, we look at Indonesia, and when we're talking about Indonesia, 97% of people actually interact with the digital world on their phone. So it's very easy for these people to actually use a mobile app, which could be a super app where you can do your payments, your car hailing, your dating, you're doing e-commerce, and finances. So everything is right there plugged in, and it's easy for people to actually be in just one ecosystem. And we all know that this business of super app started with WeChat in 2014, which became the first super app in the world. Then Alipay also came about. And now some of us are gathering at the Singapore FinTech Festival, where most of us would be using Grab, which is working in Southeast Asia in the ASEAN market, started from Malaysia, then headquartered in Singapore, but was able to customize their model, fit it into different molds when they were moving from, let's say, a Thailand to a Vietnam to Indonesia. So I think the ability to understand your consumer and give them what they want is where the beauty of super apps really is.
Now, you said something important when you started describing the super app. You said it's what the consumers do, which is not necessarily just what the consumers buy. Let me say that because I hear often people talking about super apps and making a mistake in terms of conceiving it as a marketplace, just a marketplace. Like some of the banks or some of the neobanks are thinking of putting X number of products into the same app and think that becomes a super app. That's just a marketplace. Does not follow necessarily what consumers do in a way that consumers are compelled to go back, whether the mechanism is messaging, payments, or another mechanism, but that's super important. Now, we just said that super apps are born as a concept or as a reality in Asia Pacific, but they're appealing everywhere in the world. Let me tell you this. We just made and published a research as the IBM Institute for Business Value on banking for small and medium enterprises that we presented in the episode 13, the one previous to this one on the Banker's Bookshelf. And we surveyed more than 1,200 SME owners of small and medium enterprises, and ask them what they want from their bank to become more efficient. And these SMEs work in every jurisdiction that matters in the world. And the vast majority of them said they would love to have a super app. So clearly, from the perspective of the final consumers which are out there, there is already an imagination of the potential for them to improve the way they work by accessing one of these apps, one of these solutions. Can you give us some examples that explain how consumers in the market that you saw can effectively leverage these super apps to do their daily job. Let me think, for example, suggested to start with WeChat, which is a huge ecosystem for merchants.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And also, thank you for sharing what you discovered through your research. I think, Paolo, if you look at WeChat or any app in the Asian context, you will essentially see that people start their day with that app and finish their day with that app. So let's take an example of a person who's going to work. They wake up in the morning, they look at the calendar, they send messages to their colleagues, that is through WeChat. And then they order a cab, it happens through WeChat. They want to buy a coffee, they can order through WeChat, they can pay through WeChat. Once they get into the office, they're texting their friends to make a plan on what they want to do later into the day. They do that through WeChat. They want to do any kind of social media interaction, just like Facebook or Instagram, that functionality in a different way is also plugged into the same ecosystem. They want to look for potential partners and date, they also go back to WeChat. And then in the evening, when they're catching up with their friends, again, they make the reservation through WeChat. They get to the restaurant, they're sharing pictures, taking selfies, everything goes on WeChat. They make the payment through WeChat, go back home, order a cab on WeChat. And while they're sitting in the cab, they're again sending pictures to each other, texting through WeChat. So here it is, 97% of their time goes on either WeChat or Alipay if you're based in China. And that is also one of the reasons, maybe we are going to touch upon this later in this conversation, is where the People's Bank of China, PBOC, decided to do CBDC so that they know where the money is going, what the payment trends are like. They want to read the consumer mind and behavior. Because every time there's a payments happening, that's where the real data is. So we are talking about apps which are literally taking over all our needs, whether it's for the e-commerce, our payments, interaction with the social world. So these apps are very intuitive. You don't really have to leave the ecosystem. You made the comparison of how this could be just an aggregator, but also something I wanted to highlight to your audience is that when we talk about these apps in the Asian or the Eastern market, if I were to say it that way, we're looking at a horizontal kind of a platform where there are a lot of multitude of services. And you oftentimes don't see that in the Western market because we are talking about what you actually said is a vertical functionality, whereby there could be a super app, especially in Europe because of over-regulation. But this super app is just maybe for finance. It could be, let's say, a Revolut or Wise. So all the functionality, but only in the finance world. Or there could be a super app only in the medical care or telemedicine space. So they're looking at a vertical and trying to be giant there. But when you look at the Asian context, it's all in, every in kind of a feature. And I think it has its own good and bad, especially from a data privacy angle, especially when you feel that if a platform fails, what happens to your data within that and the kind of addiction that you have with that platform. So there are a lot of pros and cons around it. But like you rightly said, and that was also through your research, that by 2050, world 70% of population would be using one or multiple of these super apps. So this is how the future looks like.
Okay, so I do agree that the future is about the platform economy. So at least a large part of the economy will be managed in a way that corresponds to platform theory to create engagement. That's the reason why the horizontal element is important because within financial services, the engagement tends to be limited. You don't go back every moment to look at your bank account, but you need to figure out other ways for consumers to be interested in using your technology, your solution, your app coming to your digital premises and therefore give them back something. Now, the second chapter of your book is One World, Two Cultures, and you touched upon that a little bit. I remember I was invited to speak at the BIS Innovation Summit last year, a couple of years ago, and there were discussions among central bankers on CBDCs. You mentioned CBDCs in the context of WeChat and the Chinese economy. And East and West had a very different approach, especially in terms of privacy and basically the capability of central bankers to understand or to track basically the system. So this is at least one of the differences that might impact the way technology realizes the future of financial services, but also the fate of super apps. Which are the differences you see in terms of culture? I presume that you're thinking more East and West in this case, or advanced economies versus the other advanced and the emerging economies.
Yeah, you're spot on. It is about the cultural aspect, of course, because I think when we talk about the human behavior, we look at their culture, the environment, and the choices they make. And it's largely influenced by where we come from, what the society does, and what the society expects us to do. And I'm able to say this because for the large chunk of my life, I have lived in Asia. And primarily speaking, we are very much okay to share our data. And that's something that you also mentioned, and the book also does highlight on what is our relationship with our data or the privacy factor. Of course, the awareness level is going up, and we want to decide where we share our information and to what extent, what is being done with that data. But when these apps were actually starting off, there was not much of awareness. So it was slightly easier. So that is one factor. But beyond that, I did allude to this previously when I was talking about Indonesia, the digital first experience, which is about how did you interact with the digital world for the first time, the offline to online journey. When that happened, for a lot of us in Asia, it happened on a mobile device. So once you come on a mobile device for the first time and interact into the virtual world, it's a lot more easier for you to get hooked onto an app. Whereas when you look at the Western world, we're looking at using a computer, maybe, right? So you made those baby steps, and here people leapfrogged.
You make me laugh here because I was invited to open the Korean FinTech Week in late August. And I was introduced by the top regulator of South Korea. I had a speech on AI and productivity. And then after, as I was there with the top regulator, I visited with him all of the banks and the fintech they were showcasing in this very large conference their solutions. And what struck me is that everyone was showing their solution like this. With a screen that was a portrait. Then you go to Money 2020 and everybody has it like this, like a website. Already by looking, into the conference and the booths, you see this difference between the parts of Asia and the rest of the world. So really mobile, not, sometimes only like Nubank or mobile first versus the rest of the world, which is still, if you like, web-based. And that has also consequences in the way you imagine and you design the solutions that allow you to interact with the consumers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a great observation. And I think that has played a key role. So I can give you an example of my mom. She uses 3 of those super apps that we can talk about in the Indian context. And she tends to switch from one to the other based on which is giving her more discount or loyalty points. So when I'm visiting her, she gives me her phone and she tells me, oh, you can go and scan the QR code when you're buying 2 kgs of milk. But remember, you ask the guy where the discount is and you scan that. So we are Asians, we like discounts, and we
Unless your
are
mom is Asian and my mom Italian, doesn't do that. She has one phone, not even one super app.
so this is the magic of it. And I remember I was talking to one of the founders of the super app from the Indian market, and he told me his biggest delight or the biggest victory for him is the fact that he went with his kids to a faraway remote village in a mountain in north part of India. And once he got there, the family, the 4 of them, had noodles on the top of the mountain. They had tea, chai, and then he asked the shop how could he pay, and he said, "Oh, you can scan through PhonePe." And he was actually the founder of PhonePe, and he said, "For me, it was my biggest victory because I could see the QR code of my app on this mountain, which is not accessible anywhere." And I think that is what the beauty of these super apps is in the Asian context, because the regulators took a back seat. They were not trying to stifle the innovation. They were not really sure what will be the impact of these super apps. And if you look at the European market, you spoke about European Union and how overregulated it can be sometimes. So you are sitting in the driver's seat. You're literally deciding what the industry can do and cannot do. And I think that's where sometimes the magic goes away, because I did interview Seri Chia, who's the Cambodia central bank governor, and she spoke about this concept of giving the leeway to these apps so that we can see what they can do, how they can solve the market problems. And I think to me, that is the beauty of being in a Singapore or an Asian context, where you can see things thriving, but also there's an element of things not going wrong, things going wrong sometimes. But to go back to our original question, of course, there is the element of culture, there's the element of privacy, how we perceive things as Asian versus the Westerners, and how the regulators have played a role in contributing to the ecosystem. So that is what the chapter really explores about. And it also goes to show that we will see these apps thriving, and perhaps your Italian mom is going to use one super app and my Asian mom is going to use multiple super apps. So I think it's going to happen, but the shape and the form is going to look.
Okay, so some are excited, some places, jurisdictions are moving ahead, others are very curious, many are hesitant. Chapter number 3 is about hesitancy. So what do you see? What is the reason for? Is it just regulation? Is it also habits of the way we do things in different parts of the world? What's the story and what is the solution to hesitancy?
Yeah, of course. I think it touches upon what we just discussed about being hesitant to share our data. And we're talking about the Western world here, where they are not willing to share their data. They never had the mobile first experience. They made gradual steps into the digital world. And at the same time, they feel happy using what they're using. So I spoke about the discount or the loyalty factor as well. For us, it's flexible. We will go where we are price sensitive society. And for example, most of the Westerners would like to stick to a service or a service provider because they're very happy with it. They're not looking at price points so much. So all these factors, I think, play a huge role in how the functionality of the app really works, but also what it means for the larger consumption of the society. So to give you an example, and also to answer a question about the solution part, when you look at Grab, of course, started from the Singapore market as a ride-hailing app, but later got into payments, and now they also have a robo-advisory and whatnot. But when they moved to different countries in Southeast Asia, let's say Thailand, they knew that people are not earning so much as, let's say, a Singapore, and therefore the business model was more towards how can you order a scooter there? And when you're ordering a scooter, how can you also have a combo in terms of delivery or food or some other delivery? So I think to understand your local market and having customized solutions, and also during COVID, a lot of their drivers were facing a tough time. How could you provide for those drivers, giving them small ticket size loans, providing them the insurance, and understanding that you also have migrant workers in these countries, especially in Singapore. I remember doing this project with BlackRock, where we were trying to see how the maids and the blue collar workers who come to Singapore, how can they start investing with their $1, with $10? And we ended up working with Grab, and we understood that Grab was giving them the functionality of just investing with $1. So you need to understand where the hiccup is, the roadblocks are, and to try to overcome to that. And a lot of apps, when you look at the journey in the Western market, I think they're not able to crack it because the consumer mindset is very rigid. They don't want to share their data. They're always watching over their shoulder. They're scared of the big brother.
Okay, so that's very interesting. And I had conversations with a number of executives this year, again, for the recent research on small and medium enterprises, banking for small and medium enterprises. And we talk about open banking, and bankers on both sides of the world were telling me that not many of their customers were willing to give them consent for open banking. To give you an example, in Europe, and in Brazil, they said 20% of the clients gave them consent, no more than that. So both institutions were trying to convince the consumers basically to trust them more and to give them consent. Now, FemBanking is not yet a super app. It may be a starting point, if you start from financial services. So here we have Nubank in Brazil, 20%, and we have other banks in Europe, 20%. Now, the European banks tell me the way we approach it is we explain to consumers that if they give us consent to see more of their transactions across different bank accounts, we can price the credit relationship in more convenient terms. So it's very transactional. It's inside the pricing point. Nubank says, we don't care about the pricing point. What we want to demonstrate to them is that if they give us consent, we can see all the transactions across different accounts. We provide them a solution to help them be more successful in their business journey. Now, as simple as it is, it's very different because the definition of value is not the same. What the consumers get out of the digital solution is not the same because one stays within financial services and the other one instead starts getting into the business of these entrepreneurs. And I think this is one of the most interesting elements of culture and perspective that I discovered unwantingly, right, in the way people are talking about that, because it's the way you conceive it that allows you to design your platform and your solution in such a way that can scale up into the world of super app or different type of engagement. So now, is this going to be temporary or located to Asia Pacific only or Latin America, or is this going to be permanent and expanding in other jurisdictions? What is your opinion here, your forecast?
Paolo, I just finished the book, so I have to be biased. No, but jokes apart, I think when you read the book and whoever reads it, they will definitely be fascinated by the fact that how much potential there is of a super app for unbanked people. And I spoke about it in the beginning, and I'm touching upon it again because as someone coming from a middle-class family in India, I started my career in Singapore. I've been fairly lucky to have the right opportunities, create a mark for myself. But I'm also aware of India being the most populated country in the world right now. And as they say, India lives in its villages. Talking about just 300 million people in Southeast Asia using super apps, but there are 630 million people who don't have access to finance. So 9 out of 10 people usually don't get credit card approved. 6 out of 10 people don't get bank loans. And these kind of people end up paying 300% interest rate to money lenders, right? The loan sharks. So this is a big business problem. And I think super apps definitely have the potential to be disruptive in that sense because they reach where banks don't reach. They are being the right partner for those who are not being heard, seen, and attended to by the traditional financial institutions. And I really see it because I have done some missions, and until recently I was based in Fiji Islands. I've been to these countries where the relationship with money is very different. To give you an example, when you go to PNG, Papua New Guinea in South Pacific, on a given Friday, you will see money coming through helicopter and being dropped into the villages, right? When you go to Honiara in Solomon Islands, you see people coming from all over the different islands to the capital city, Honiara, and they withdraw money from the teller machine. They queue up the queue for hours, and when they're going back on a boat to their respective islands, a lot of people know that their pocket is full of money. So they are being killed on the way, they are mugged on the way back. So this is how money is being distributed. Can we solve this problem? So perhaps not. It's a long process. But I still feel there is a great potential. And I have seen this with M-Pesa in Fiji. M-Pesa, as you know, is a digital wallet for Vodafone. It doesn't need any introduction. But when I was working with M-Pesa and other mobile subscribers, I found that initially the stickiness for the app was not there. But during COVID, when the government was giving G2P payments, through M-Pesa, people were forced to go back to it, and then came micro insurance, micro lending, so sending, spending, lending. All those elements were really sharpened in that app. So for me, definitely, I feel it is going to be a permanent solution, of course, for SME owners, because when you look at the informal SME sector, it's a huge sector in Asia. 90% of people are employed in this space. It serves the problem of access to these individuals and small companies. But also at the same time, people like you and me, Paolo, we travel so much. You tell me, we are always looking for good solutions where we have to pay lesser FX rate. We go for Wise or something like this. So whether it's about literate person or illiterate person, I think super apps are providing the solutions, which really works for everyone. And I think that's where the beauty is. Someone just told me there's a dating super app in the Western market, and it's going really well. So you at least you swipe the person, you go on a date. It gives you recommendation for a restaurant. It tells you from where can you buy potential gifts. It could be flowers. It could be something else. So I think these are very refreshing ideas,
I
right?
hope the success there is to go back to the same person, not to go back to the app.
Yeah, like they say, Hinge is an app that they want you to delete.
At least once. That's very interesting, and thank you for the conversation. We really went through like a discussion that touched upon love as well. And let me tell you, this is the last episode 2024. It is the 14th episode of 2024 that will be released in December. And we had a journey for the Bankers Bookshelf. It's our first year within Breaking Banks Europe. They started with a presentation of the book of Paul Sironi. We talked about platforms and sandwich economies, and we are concluding this first year of the Bankers Bookshelf with a very insightful discussion about super apps, which is the crowning of the platform economy. Now, where can people find your book and see your work?
Yeah, before I answer that, Paolo, I wanted to say you're finishing the year with the bang. You spoke to me. So this is the best finish that you can have for this 2024. So the book is available as paperback. I would assume it's going to be easily available in the bookstores near you, wherever you are. But if it's not, then definitely I would suggest you go on Amazon. There's a Kindle version, there's a paperback. And I'm still on the road speaking at Singapore FinTech Festival. Right after the Singapore Writers Festival, then I'm going to be in Dubai, Budapest. So if I happen to be in one of in the country where the listeners are, very happy to swing by, sign some copies, and also talk to the readers. But also, I'm very inspired by your journey. So I think I should learn from you
Thank you.
how to do
So
more
likewise. So I do recommend the book of Neha Mehta, One Stop Unlocking the Power of Super Apps. And I invite everyone to stay tuned to the Bankers Bookshelf because we are starting 2025 with a wonderful cadence. You will learn more about that in a short time. It is clear by now that the Bankers Bookshelf is an incredible opportunity to learn from recognized authors like Neha Mehta. Their work has found a prominent space in the library of curious bankers and fintech entrepreneurs, and it is now available to you. Arrivederci and enjoy the Bankers Bookshelf jingle. Ciao a tutti.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.